Hello, everybody. The grim darkness of the far future. There are nerds here to talk about it. I'm Kamara.
I'm Joel.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone beyond and between, and frankly, wherever you want to be at this point, to Warhammer and Weebs, a podcast for Warhammer, about Warhammer, and everything else that catches our interest. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. Daylight savings time is getting closer, so that means the nights are going to be a lot lighter, which is nice for me when I want to go out for dinner. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Chilling at home.
Daylight's gonna be such a whiplash, I swear. Okay.
Oh, right.
Yeah. It's, Speaking of topics, today, we just had our last episode where we talked about pretty much 40k history in a nutshell. Very dense.
Depression, galaxy. Depression.
Oh, it gets much worse when we start going into detail.
Oh, boy.
Oh, man. There's so many interesting topics. But before we really start talking about them, it's worth talking about a very important element of 40k in a little bit more detail, and that's the Emperor.
The Emperor. Can't have a sci-fi galaxy without an Emperor. Can't have a sci-fi.
You could, well, yes and no, because theoretically, the Emperor hasn't technically been a major part of 40k for about 10,000 years, but his influence and just the shadow and impact of everything he's done reverberates for millennia. We'll talk about it in a moment, because it's just so much that, like, he changes the board so radically in such a short time too.
So he's very much a haunt the narrative kind of guy.
Oh, absolutely. Occasionally he just he's still kind of around. We'll talk about it in a second. It's very, very odd. But start with the basics, which is pretty much, we know nothing really about him.
Show over, folks. I'm just kidding.
So much of the Emperor, I mentioned before that he is human, but
maybe
he's definitely human, but it's almost human beyond humanity. It's sort of almost like he has transcended mankind and landed back into it. I mentioned before that his thought process is part of the reason we could never really kind of get a book from him, because his thought process is so alien.
Mm-hmm.
It's baffling, even just sort of looking at what he does, how other people observe him, that it's such a baffling, frightening, beyond the scope concept that it's really difficult to sort of like get a handle on him.
He's something that an author couldn't even comprehend, even if they try, without probably going crazy themselves.
Pretty much. Well, here is one very, very important aspect of him, and that is something that is more or less true from beginning to end. He loves humanity. Absolutely everything he does, for good or ill, is for humanity's benefit. Not always kind.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always merciful. It's not even always moral. But it is, in theory, for humanity's benefit.
See, that already makes him scary because, like, I always say that the scariest villains are the ones who genuinely love stuff, and it's like, oh no, I wish you were just evil for evil's sake. No, you genuinely love us, and it's like, oh no, that's even worse. That's even
There's one book in particular I want to talk about that showcases that very concept.
Mhm.
Before we really get to that, we kind of have to start at the sort of beginning. Don't really know much about him, but we do our theories, and we know he's very, very old.
Is he like the first man kind of old, or is he just been
Our
around for a
theories,
long
he's been the first man. Our theories that he's just been around for a very long time.
So is he, you think he's like is there like an Adam situation? Adam is in the biblical Adam, not Adam is in He-Man Adam. Not he.
Well, there have been theories that he effectively a warp god, a minor warp god that kind of either took on the form of man or there are some theories that he almost created man, but I don't really buy that one. But there are some theories that he has been like a minor warp god and he just sort of accepted humanity as his people.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's more of a slightly less popular theory.
It sounds like almost like a more darker version of Superman. Although it doesn't, I don't know if he like crash landed on, or I don't know if the theory involves him like crash landing on Earth or something, or just like he showed up one day and it's like, I like you people.
Something like that, although it's a little bit less crash landing and more when you consider the warp and you consider the reflection is time is strange. It doesn't move in a linear path. Things have both already happened and yet never begun.
Right.
That is one. So in theory, Emperor has always been here, and yet at the same time was never here. You go with that concept.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other more popular theories, and one of the ones I tend to subscribe to is is the shaman theory, which is that there were the very beginning of humanity. There were a lot more shamans who could utilize this psychic energy, and they were very powerful. But either they were also far more susceptible to the warp, and particularly the absorption of their souls. And as a result, the number differs. I've seen like as low as like a dozen or so. I've seen heard as many as 1,000 or thousands. But there's this idea that all of the early shamans of history came together and did a ritual sacrifice. And they combined all their souls to a singular, uber powerful being. This was born into a brand new human child that grew up, and this was the Emperor.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Kind of, so he's like an amalgamation of all the shamans in one person.
Yes, and it's the reason he's so powerful, it's the reason he's so smart, it's the reason he's so strong, that he is the amalgamation of dozens of souls combined together into a singular being. It's the reason we never really get a psyker to his level.
You know, it's kind of funny that you mentioned this, and the fact that we're talking about an emperor is I feel like that's what Palpatine was trying to say that he was with all the Sith. Like, I'm all the Sith combined. Although I always took that just he was just being his egotistical self. Like, I'm the best Sith, so I'm all the Sith instead of just. Now, I don't think you are all the Sith just combined into a bunch of souls. I just think you're just saying that to just be your narcissistic self. Or this Emperor might actually be like a bunch of people all at one's body and soul merged together. It also reminds me of a Godzilla origin where Godzilla was a bunch of souls of a bunch of people all in one. But that's a whole other topic. But that's interesting. I just find that kind of funny and interesting too. I like that theory. It's a good theory of like he's a bunch of people in one body, become a Superman. type of person.
Palpatine is just being egotistical because
That's who
the very
he is.
concept of Sith implies the very concept of that would imply the Sith would have to either work together or not fight each other to be one, and it's Sith.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen the Legends of Sith spirits? They hate the new people who are always in
They
charge.
hate each other. Sith hate everything.
Exactly. But I just find that funny. I just find that funny, the concept.
Oh yeah, so he spends his early years kind of like underground. He's pretty much the guy from the get-go, but he doesn't really push himself onto a lot of things. He's very much a background person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have these theories that he has sort of been other people in history.
Mm-hmm.
Been, Alexander the Great, in theory. Joan of Arc, Cleopatra.
He can gender bend? Or the
We'll
Hague can
talk
gender
about that
bend?
in a moment. Because it is a very interesting... It's very odd. Well, not odd, but it is one of those things where it's like, we look at the Emperor beyond the limit of our own sort of little expectations.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of just does this throughout history. He's different people. He's very much on the background. And we talked about this briefly, that he knows the gods exist. But at this point, the gods kind of aren't really a thing. They're a thing, but they don't have quite as much impact on humanity. For the most part, the rise is kind of smooth, but it's far easier for humanity to get to the point it does by the time the Age of Strife hits. Then, at that point, hole opens in the sky, the Great Game really kicks off, more so than usual, and humanity's kind of caught in the crossfire. So, at this point, the Emperor kind of has to step up, because he was kind of content to be in the background during the whole rise of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Now hell exists in reality. It's bleeding through. There's mutants and demons and xenos everywhere, and everything's in shambles. Doesn't look like humanity's gonna pick itself up right away, because at this point now you have four major contenders who now don't see there's no benefit to humanity rising up again, because they're getting a lot of worship out of this. They're getting a lot of power.
Yeah. We need humanity. We got this cool stuff going on.
They go by different names. There's different. You God of War. Got like almost every civilization in human history had a pantheon of sorts, whether it's one god or several gods. There are elements of life that humans tend to pray to people or pray to gods for. You want a good harvest. You want to live through war. You want to defeat your enemies. You want to have a fruitful relationship or marriage or fertility. You want to be pulled out of the rut of despair, or you want to not die from this, not die from that, etc., etc., etc.
I'm sorry. I just have this image of like the gods just sitting at a desk. It's like, oh, these people, like, you want this, you want that. What about what I want? That's what God wants.
When we talk about the Chaos Gods, there's good and there is bad. Every Chaos God, most of it is bad, but
yeah,
just like the warp, there is a reflection onto every god, and
right.
while most of it is terrible, but that same thread, there's a reflection onto that is arguably good, which makes it all the more difficult to defeat them.
Right.
On the fact that they're like immortal uber beings of motion and concept.
Right.
Hits. The Emperor's like, okay, I gotta do something. And so he starts making deals and doing experiments. He's got his custodies and pretty much goes ahead and he's like, all right, I'm going to create these, super powerful and anatomically perfect human beings. Also incredibly difficult to make, meaning the number is limited. This lets him really kind of kick things off, begin taking territory. As he's moving throughout these various territories.
Where does his territory start, though? Like, what's his first little fiefdom? Like, where on Earth?
One of the first things he goes and one of the first groups he defeats is known as the Sigillites, which we'll talk about in a moment, because one of the best people to join his group, Malkador, comes from this group. And said group, the former headquarters of their area, or I guess country, as you could be, he goes ahead and he takes it over, and this is like the Himalayan mountain region-esque area. Raises it all to the ground. The entire Imperial Army, like imagine the entire Imperial Palace. Like imagine just how big the Himalayan mountain range is.
Yeah.
In modern 40K, that is the Imperial Palace.
Oh, dang. They built super building pretty much then.
They built a palace the size of a country there.
Jesus, all for one dude.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of secrets in there, but yeah, no, that is the Imperial Palace. They just raised a mountain to the ground.
Yikes. The super palace. Well, I guess the Emperor of Humanity got to have a fancy schmancy house.
Yeah. Well, here's a little less about the house, so much as we'll talk about it in a second. He takes over, and from here he begins sort of moving out and taking over territory. As he takes over territory, he takes, different groups of men, willingly or otherwise, to experiment on. Some of these men bow to him normally. Others are kind of like slaves.
Yeah.
There's a fair bit of indoctrination going on. There's a fair bit of just a lot of ugly things happen throughout 40K history, and the Unification Wars is no exception. There were a lot of people did not bend to the Emperor, so they were forced to bend.
Right.
And so, as he's taking over this territory, because Earth is big, it takes a while. As he's taking over this territory, some swear to him, some have to be convinced to swear to him. He begins refining his gene sculpting and biotech. He pretty much has custodies at this point, but they are, I cannot stress enough, they are hella difficult and hella expensive to make. You need infantry. And
right.
That's where you really start getting the Thunder Warriors. And the Thunder Warriors, and we talked about them briefly, were generally grown men who were given these gene sculpting, biotech, bioengineering, mostly a lot of organs shoved into them that made them incredibly strong, incredibly fast, but also very unstable.
Ooh. I can imagine having all those organs in there. They're like, does not do well for a good digestive system.
You very clearly see they weren't meant to last, and we'll have their own episode when we talk about the Verse creations. The Unification Wars, as he's getting these territories, these Thunder Warriors are pretty much driving through, and they are rough. Also, one of the most powerful sets of soldiers to date, because even though the opposition as techno-barbarians, there is like a lot of smart people. Like genetic engineering is a thing. Warlords and dictators, and even just like rich people or kings or lords or ladies who have influence and resources, who they created genetically enhanced soldiers. Your Banes,
Right. That makes sense. Is Earth pre this kind of Mad Maxy at this point, or is it just a bunch of places different depending on where in the world you are at that point?
Heavily depends on where you are. There are some places again that they're very very Mad Maxian. There are some places. I think we compared it a little bit to Fallout,
Right.
and also aligned itself with the intelligence levels because you might have it's just your general farmer, pushing around along a cow, but then that farmer, depending on circumstances or just, what's going on, what region you are, who your lord or leader is, who you answer to, who you don't answer to. Farmer might just have an RPG,
Okay.
just have a sword, might just have. There's a lot of dark age of technology still kicking about.
That makes sense.
A lot of it falls on the wayside or is confiscated by the emperor. Still out and about. It's still being used, and that includes this bioengineering, this gene sculpting, and as well the power armor, which would go on to be co-opted by the emperor and improved upon for his forces. And as they are taking this territory, he's also gathering people. Smart cookies. Some people, and it's not even just scientists. He's gathering people known as perpetuals, who are effectively immortals because they're just kicking around. He's gathering they're psychers. He's gathering people who good at engineering, good at technology. He's gathering the best of these people and bringing them, often unwillingly, to his lab to work on his further projects, particularly the Space Marines and the Primarchs. We'll talk about them later on, but these are kind of the ultimate infantry and general vanguards that he's needing, and the Thunder Warriors are pretty much just buddies to be used in the meanwhile, as get these things done, let the better stuff come later.
That makes sense. I'm sure he's building up like the area as well we conquered. Like, is he building like his administration? What civilians do when they get conquered by him?
This actually segues very nicely to the book I told you about earlier.
Right, I remember.
It's known as The Last Church.
The Last Church.
And is one of the best perspectives, because some of the best perspectives you read about in the Black Library books, the company that produces the Warhammer stuff, or GW's publishing company. Some of the best book perspectives, I think, are ones that come from normal humans.
Ooh, that makes sense.
Because there is, in this world, where you have giant super soldiers and giant bugs that can just slice you in half, and aliens that can just read your mind or tear out your spinal cord and use it as piano keys. You have mankind, this massively prolific species. There are countless numbers of them that deal with all of this happening. And sometimes some of the best stories you get from them are the ones that are just normal people having to deal with this stuff. Not even politicians, not super soldiers, not nobles, just normal people.
No, that makes sense. Those are always fun to get kind of from the ground. When you have like these over-the-top worlds, the more from the ground perspectives.
This this last church book features a character, this Uriah, and he is pretty much the last priest of the last church. Because at this point, this is the tail ends of the Unification Wars. The Unification Wars themselves last quite a long time. It's a far more meticulous movement. It's almost like he was a little bit more careful with it, because it lasts, I think, 6, 7, close to 800 years. Which is wild when you consider the Great Crusade was like a little over 2 centuries. And you also got to remember, he's, refining his technique and his infantry at this point. You can't really move to the stars until you have a really good foundation.
Right.
And so, for this, this short story, The Last Church, there is a priest, Uriah, and he refuses to kind of end his sermons and end his church because he hates the emperor. He hates the idea of the emperor. And throughout these centuries, the emperor has been, and we'll talk about why in a moment, he has not only been taking territory, he has been destroying every element of religion he can, from churches to mosque to altars. Anyone who does preaching, he's been burning books, he's been denouncing faith. It's pretty much outlawed everywhere.
Right.
And so for Uriah, he effectively one of the last ones who are like, I'm going to keep preaching, I'm going to keep professing my faith. And even as his congregation sort of disappears, because slowly but surely, all this territory, all these ideas have either been adopted forcibly or otherwise from the emperor. And so there's one night where he's, just in his church, he's preparing for his sermon. It's a quiet night sermon, and, it's empty. It's a very dark and stormy night.
Yeah.
And he comes a man comes to his church, a very large man in a cloak, and he goes ahead and he says his name is Revelation, and he decides he reveals to Uriah that, hey, this is the last church. I wish to speak to its keeper. I wish to discuss your philosophy and your faith and what's going on. And Uriah and this man, Revelation, have a very long philosophical, moral conversation about faith and religion. And Uriah presents these, this marvelous artwork, these stone that is said to be blessed and heal people, these books, and the whole time, Revelation is just sort of announcing all of it, giving logic and reason as to, well, no, it's just that artists had to feed themselves. Of course they made a beautiful work. They were going to get paid for it. This stone is just, people going ahead and seeing things that they think they want to see. It's all can be explained by reason, not faith. And Uriah, he's getting a little irritated. Obviously, it's like, it's a little, hard to, this is something that happens in real life as well. Whether you are agnostic or atheist, being preached to or talked to by someone of faith, or you are someone of faith, attempting to sway the mind of someone who is agnostic or atheist or otherwise not really associated with religion, it is very hard to push the concept of faith onto a person whose mind can't just click and say, oh yeah, cool, and yeah, that makes sense, of course. you want, a lot of times, there's logic, there's reason, and you can't, I don't say you can't, it's very difficult to push that away in favor of this metaphysical concept that arguably can't be proven. And this is what Uriah has to try to argue and push for, because he has to argue that, hey, no, it's this fundamental part of life. It's this fundamental concept of humanity, that faith is just a part of us. It is, religion is an element of just who we are. You can't just take that away. And Revelation is just sort of disgusting. Well, what about how religion has hurt and harmed and just been used to justify, cruelty and murder and all sorts of just horrors of history, crusades, etc., etc., etc. And Uriah argues that, well, no, you can also, religion has helped people as well. You have communities coming together on faith. You have communities who are coming together to provide charity on faith, support, emotional strength in dire times. It's just back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually Uriah argues, well, I know God exists because I've seen him. And despite everything, you can argue, these people saw this and this, but I saw him. And he discusses his life as a young man who, saw the way his world was changing with the Emperor's armies and was irritated and angry and upset. Just the callousness of this weird dude who, he doesn't really see, he has never really seen him. There's this guy and these forces, these massive, terrifying brutes are coming into his home and his city and his town and these other cities and just tearing things apart, putting up banners, ordering people around. And whoever you have your leader for, doesn't matter, this guy says they're the leader now. You get to disobey him. He says goes. And he spends a while going around attempting to find like a pocket of something, whether it's freedom, whether it's resistance. He laments just having to go around and see these places where people can barely read or write. People can barely, support themselves, but they are praising Emperor. And eventually he finds one such pocket of resistance, and they've overthrown the governor, sponsored by the Emperor, who's been put in charge. They overthrow her, and they take control again. And they gather a massive army, go ahead and fight back, to rebel. And I think it was like 50,000? It's like thousands of people.
Oh, wow.
And go ahead and they come up against they come up against a battalion of Thunder Warriors. And Uriah then describes just the horror of these massive men in armor opening fire, and just how people's bodies are exploding, limbs are being shattered and ripped off for like the volley of these massive bullets being shot through with terrifying force, going through people, shattering them, splitting them apart. And then as the army begins to crumble, because it's not really a true army, it's more almost like massive, almost rabble, like push forward through, rah, screw the Emperor, we're gonna win, we've got this, the numbers. And
the Emperor's got guns.
As this falls apart, you then have the Thunder Warriors charging, and he describes this horror as he hears people screaming, because they've got chainsaw swords, and they are running through with unrelenting strength and purpose, and There are sounds of people being trampled both by their fellow man and just being crushed underfoot by these massive armored boots, and just the sound of like people being rent apart by chainsaws, and the smell of blood and feces, and the horror of hearing people begging for their lives and being answered with violence. And he's laying there, wounded, hit by shrapnel, weeping and crying and realizing he's gonna die, and he passes out. And he wakes up again, and it's silent, and he can hear the Thunder Warriors celebrating their victory, and he despairs because he's bleeding out. He's just gonna die in this, amongst all these bodies, forgotten and alone. Mm-hmm. And then abruptly, he sees a flash of gold. And this presence, it's him. Like, why do you deny me? You will know that I am the only truth and the only way. And he, passes out again. He wakes up. He's been healed. And he wanders. There's no one alive. He's the only one there. He goes home, realizes, his family, they're all gone. They're murdered. He has nothing left. And he goes into this abandoned church. He goes ahead and he takes on the robes and the life of a priest. And he spends his days for several decades after preaching and the glory of God and offering charity and kindness and sanctuary and food and whatever he can to, make up for his earlier youth and make up and live his life according to the tenets of God. And at the end of the night, there's this back and forth, and finally he's like, all right, you don't believe me, there's nothing you can say that's gonna change my mind. Revelation's like, all right, one more thing though. And reveals himself to be, of course, the Emperor.
Dun,
resplendent gold.
Oh, of course.
And it all comes to truth that the man that Uriah has dedicated his life to is just the Emperor.
Damn. That was a pretty good story, honestly. I was getting intrigued.
It's not over.
Oh, no.
Because the Emperor's like, hey, you know what? You are one of the best humans and most moral, kind beings I have met. Come with me. Come with me to the stars. We're going to change the entire species. We're going to change our fate. We're going to change the galaxy. And you go ahead. You deserve more than this. We deserve more than this. We go ahead and we can go beyond this. He walks outside with the Emperor because he's still kind of like, whoa, my life has been a lie. And he walks outside and he watches as the Thunder Warriors, who are out there, a flamethrower to the church and burn it alive. Not burn it alive. They just burn it, and he's watching as this place of faith and human compassion and history and art and togetherness is just going up in flames. And the Emperor's like, forget all that, we're gonna go someplace else. We're gonna build a better place. It's gonna be a world of rationale and reason, and humanity will rise beyond to take over its birthright of the galaxy. And he looked at the Emperor and he's like, well, I don't think I can be part of this, because what I did, what I believed in, may have been a lie, but I still did good. I still helped people under that lie. Whether or not it was the truth didn't matter. What I did with that truth did. So he's like, you have this great vision. Can't be part of that. Very careful though, because I can see the writing on the wall. You are going to irreparably change humanity. It's arguably no longer human. If it doesn't go the route you need to go, it's gonna end up just being the very thing you are trying to change anyway. That's just the nature of humanity. Life is an Ouroboros, and there's some things you just cannot change. And so, with that, he's like, hey, peace. Don't have to become a god. And he walks back into his church as it's burning and stays in it and lets it collapse around him.
Damn.
And that is the life of the last priest.
The Emperor got pieced out by an actual, just regular priest dude.
To be fair, the Emperor had a lot of respect. Like, he wanted this guy on his side. Because, like, you know, he's like, for all that you believe in something that is not true, and it's incredibly dangerous, not that I'm going to tell you why exactly it's dangerous,
right.
There's no mistaking that someone like you, this moral strength, force of will, should be there in the coming millennia or however long he lives. Your ideas, that kind of person should get to see us rise above. And he was arguably legitimately saddened that Uriah doesn't take this choice. And he's like, yeah, you know, I understand, but it's a loss. It's a great loss of humanity. This is arguably one of the most human examples of humanity distilled in a man. And to watch it go away is heartbreaking, even for someone like the Emperor.
I wonder if he ever thinks back to that day quite a bit.
I wouldn't be surprised, although he does have bigger concerns at the moment.
True. But in those quiet moments when he
doesn't
time...
really get a quiet moment. He does not get a quiet moment anymore.
Ugh, poor guy.
We'll talk about it in a little bit. So, you know, that is one of the best human perspectives, I think. It not explains the Emperor. See both glory of him, but also the immense flaws of him.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's human. He is undeniably human. He is empathetic. He is kind. He is intelligent. But it's almost at an extreme where he is so used to just having the answers, he almost cannot comprehend why anyone would be, I guess content is the right word, with a lack of truth, with something as intangible as faith. He cannot comprehend it. He can't understand it.
Sounds like he's almost too smart, which is actually what I always find interesting about characters who are like smart, and it's like, you know, not to beat down intelligence, but I always feel like there's sometimes it's like, you're too smart. Sometimes it's like sometimes you miss the simplicity of not being super highly intelligent, almost, right? You know, it's kind of that sort of situation.
Sort of like that. You have a man who I'm trying to think of a really good example. A being that's kind of, he's too smart. He's too, like, he's not even necessarily that he can be incredibly cruel, but it's not even that. And you see it best with some of his kids. Gilliman is a prime example where you almost can't. He's so smart and he's so used to having these answers and he's so used to just being able to do things, and that he almost can't understand how humans can believe in something that's not directly right in front. He's almost can't understand human ego. He can understand the worst parts of humanity, the greed, anger, things like that, because tangible reasons and solutions to them. If they're greedy, give them resources. If they're angry about something, figure it out and quell it. If they usually it has a source. If they're angry about something, well, what's wrong? They're starving, give them food. They don't have enough to drink, give them water. They don't have shelter, whatever, give them shelter. There are tangible solutions to these things. And it's like he almost both can, but at the same time very much can't understand just the weirdest, most incomprehensible parts of human nature. Why does faith exist? Why do you believe in this weird deity? It's you have this sort of, almost to hearken to the Mechanicum for a second. Why do you have someone who hits their car every time they're about to start it up? It makes no sense. It doesn't explain why it actually works. If you kick your computer, or it doesn't actually give it, a jump start. But at a certain point, you come to believe it does. You come to believe in this weird thing that shouldn't make sense and doesn't make sense, but just
why are we afraid of the number 13? Why are we afraid of the number?
Oh man, be very afraid of the number 13, because the number 13 has weight in 40k.
Oh dang. Ooh, that reminds me of Kingdom Hearts then, because 13 also has weight in Kingdom Hearts, so that's something Kingdom Hearts is. Okay, I guess that makes sense then. But it's like in the real world, like, why are we afraid of the number 13? Or Friday the 13th?
Why are we afraid of certain things? Why are we, like, logically speaking, Friday the 13th is just a day. 13th floor is just a floor. The number 4 in, I think it's Japanese. Just because it sounds like death, doesn't mean it's bad luck. Why do we believe in this stuff? Why do we have this sort of little we do, these little ceremonies we push on doing, when logically speaking, it influences absolutely nothing? But we have somehow carried that concept, this faith, these little things that don't make sense. We have somehow carried on with that throughout all of history.
Let's get into some weird metaphysics of like, well, if enough people believe it's true, then it's true. And it's like, ooh, is that true? And like, ooh. Sorry, I heard something.
Well, metaphysics in 40k is just physics.
It's true.
Enough people, and we'll talk about it in a moment, that's how it has to do with the Emperor. Believe it's true, at a certain point it just becomes fact. It has very real consequences in 40k. So, it is one of the more human, interesting books, I think, at the Emperor. Seeing this changing world, and just the human perspective, having to see terrifying shift and seeing this writing on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Then you know the story from there, kind of. He makes his sons, he loses his kids, which actually, do a brief segue into that. We have to talk about Irla. She was a actual. She was, and remember I told you how he's getting a lot of geneticists and incredibly intelligent people to work on these projects with him?
Yes.
She is one such person. And she's also arguably mother of the Primarchs. Her DNA is swimming in there somewhere. And you have another interesting perspective of someone who is arguably human. She's kind of immortal. At the same time, you also see you in, like, this immortal perspective. This is whatever the heck the Emperor is. Where it's... She's She's sort of, well, I say sort of, she pretty much loves the guy. And she loved, because the Emperor is very, very charismatic. He's very charismatic, he's very influential, and by that same thread, he's also very manipulative. So,
Makes sense.
I have a lot of people who, it's kind of like that concept that, I can't wait to talk about Metal Gear at some point, but it's kind of like the concept in Metal Gear, especially that pops up in Phantom Pain, where you just straight up kidnap soldiers and you stick them in a break for a bit, and eventually they are convinced to join you, and within days, if not weeks, they are praising your name.
Jesus.
That's kind of what it was like for a lot of these geneticists and these scientists and these technicians who are. He thoroughly convinces them that they are, going to do something glorious and wonderful and great. They are going to save humanity. They are going to change humanity. They are going to bring humanity to its true destiny.
Mm-hmm.
As the project goes on, slowly, a lot of them kind of see the writing on the wall, and a lot of them also become very disquieted with what they're doing. Or putting what is the closest thing to godhood, no matter how diluted it is, putting what is very close to godhood in a bottle. There's something very strange and almost disturbing about that.
I can imagine, because godhood, that's not supposed to be attainable. It's not possible.
So for a lot of these people, they slowly began kind of going away from these projects. And one of her assistants, I'm blanking on the name. Pop it up a second. She's more prevalent to the Astartes episode anyway, because her last name was Astartes. But she's one of the last to stay. And even she kind of gets to the point where she's like, yeah, there's something really wrong here, because she comes to love these Primarchs, these children, these babies, little test tubes and pods, and through what is a mother's love and compassion, by being an immortal, she also comes face to face with, yes, the Emperor's compassion, and yes, his vision for humanity, but also the sheer callousness of him. Because he sees these children, these babies, as nothing more as tools.
Makes sense.
They're not meant to be his little son, crawling around the carpet that he's loving and reading stories to. They're tools. They are vanguards. They are generals. They are weapons of war.
Right.
And she, granted, there is chaos god influence in there. She sees this kind of horrific future of a humanity guided not only by the Emperor, but these almost unfeeling demigods of immense power obey him to the letter, that have no thoughts beyond what thoughts he puts in their heads, who so much more than human, but also have nothing human about them. She, understandably, flips out, and she breaks either his containment, or she ends up helping open a portal that allows these chaos gods and chaos to kind of yeet them across the stars, and that's why they end up where they are.
That makes sense.
The interesting thing is that she lives up to the heresy, which is centuries later. The Emperor knows it was her. It's not like she fled right away or something. He knows it's her. He knows what she did. He knows that she betrayed him. Interesting thing is, he never tries to kill her for it. or lash out at her. He kind of just lets her go.
Interesting. I wonder why.
There is a question as to, did a part of him love her back? Did a part of him also see these fears that she was afraid of? Kind of go, okay, I kind of see your point. Don't know. Maybe it was sort of her last reward for helping create the Primarchs in the first place. We don't know. He definitely knows what she is. He definitely knows she's alive, but he doesn't smite her, and it's an interesting question as to why.
Interesting. Or maybe it's a mix of both. Maybe he kind of knew, like, ooh, yeah, maybe this wasn't a good idea, and also there's a little love there, sort of like, meh, I'm too lazy to deal with this. I got bigger fish to fry.
Could be that, could be all both, it could be none of it. We don't really know. It could be both a sign of sheer callousness, I don't care about this woman, or it could also be a sign of that compassion that he does have. It's strange to look at him, like that last church story. It's strange to look at him in times where he's so much more than human, but he's also achingly human. He has such strange contradictions where you have the same being that burned down a church, also grieved when its priest died in it.
The Emperor does not sound like someone you can just box into good or evil, at least in the tradition.
Really can't. It's very, again, the only thing we really know about him at the end of the day is that he loves humanity. Very difficult to parse him throughout different. It's very difficult to parse him.
It might also be possible that maybe she was just so human that it's like, well, I don't want to kill her because she's just very human. Don't want to lose another one.
It's very strange. But at this point we've moved on. We've got we've hit the stars. We're in full Great Crusade territory, and
Right.
you know the story kind of from there. He finds his kids again. He hits planets throughout the planet. At a certain point, though, he lets his son Horus Lupercal take over as War Master of the Great Crusade. Pretty much, he hands the Great Crusade to his kid. Because part of the reason is he has the more the Imperial Army and Navy spread out in the stars, the more they rely on the Astronomicon, great massive sort of lighthouse GPS thing, to guide them through the warp. And it requires a very powerful psyker to, emit that signal.
Right.
Several thousand. We'll talk about that in a second. So the Emperor is kind of stuck, for the most part, on Earth, having to ensure this lighthouse stays functioning. He also has, plans. He's working on what is known as his version of what is known as a webway. We talked briefly about that, I think, with the Eldar, but it's a very ancient sort of look at the warp and reality, the immaterium and the materium, as two sides of a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Warp is kind of like between. It was created by these very, very ancient, and we'll talk about them with the Eldar episodes and Necron episodes. They're this very old race known as the Old Ones. And it was a way to navigate travel without having to utilize the warp. And since millennia later, the Eldar continue to use it. And the Emperor looked at that and he's like, oh yeah, I want that. Because, of course, if you're already trying to avoid feeding and even possibly starve out the gods, you want way to not have to rely on their home.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, for him, he's trying to create this webwave project. It, unfortunately, it's torn to shreds, kind of by accident, by one of his kids. And, okay. We'll have to... I hesitate to talk too much about it, because a lot of it, be entrenched with the Magnus episode and the history of Magnus and what happens to him.
Mm-hmm.
But it really sets him back. And so, a permanent hole into the warp now in the palace basement
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't been closed in thousands of years, so that's part of the reason his custodians are just fighting down there. Things come through and they have to fight to make sure they don't leave containment.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just be dealing with that. But in between, he's trying to salvage this project and everything going on between the constant day. Well, he's not dealing as much with day by day. That's more Malcador's department, and he is in a very important part of the Emperor's story and administration. He's actually the one who encourages and convinces and pushes the Emperor to accept the title of the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
Because originally, the guy doesn't really want to do that, and he's like, Malcador is the one like, look, you want humanity to come together under a banner?
Mm-hmm.
Want something impressive sounding.
Right.
And nothing is more impressive than declaring yourself the Emperor of mankind.
Well, I mean, you gotta have the title that fits.
If the shoe fits, Malcador's kind of the one who went ahead and said, this is what you need to do. And,
So I got a question. Did he just just come out of the blue? Like, it always just sounded like, well, I have this army now. It's gonna come out of the blue and just declare myself Emperor of Humanity. Pop out of nowhere.
like I said, the Unification Wars took a while.
Mm-hmm.
It was brutal. Like, when I say humanity was heavily diminished, but there were still millions of people, if not billions, population-wise, on Earth, and billions died during the Unification Wars, so...
Fair.
He was arguably almost careful with that, compared to how he was with the Great Crusade. Like, and it's just did not bend. It very much depended on which sun landed on your planet, because some were willing to talk it out, most weren't. You had maybe a day or two to bend before they forced you to bend, often until so much that your face was pretty much ground into the dirt, and then continued to go down into it.
That makes sense.
So a lot of it, he doesn't have time. Remember, he's on a time limit, partially because, and we briefly talked about that, with the history episode of 40K.
Mm-hmm.
The Primarch's development was not natural. He needed a lot of help from, yes, these incredibly intelligent geneticists. Also, he might have gotten a little bit of help. He kind of struck a deal with the Chaos Gods.
Right.
Something they did helped him somehow utilize his DNA to create these Primarchs, and then he proceeded to not whatever he wanted with them. He proceeded to not do that, and so he knows they're on. He knows they're on to them. Him. He knows they're. I have a better term. He knows they're on his ass, and so it's helped. Actually, because they are so busy constantly fighting each other, time is weird for them, that they might easily say something like, oh yeah, we're gonna go beat this guy up 5 minutes, and goes, oh yeah, 5 minutes, blink, that's 200 years later.
Right.
So he knows he's on a time limit. He knows he doesn't have long to do this. He's trying to do as much as he can, a limited amount of time before they kind of get their act together. Eventually, they get their act together, and this is where the other part, again, where we talk about, like, how weird the Emperor is, that he doesn't really kind of understand human emotion sometimes. Because a lot of his kids, he plays favorites. A lot of his kids, they're dealing with stuff. They've got egos, they've got pride, they have a lot of inadequacies.
Well, when your dad's the god of all humanity, practically, and the emperor, I would think you probably feel a little insecure about yourself. As one
That,
does.
and they looked at history, like a fair few, some of them were content with that. Some of them looked at the history of, say, their namesakes from the Primarchs of the Thunder Warriors, looked at to see what happened to them, and realized, oh,
Why did you name me
the
after
replacement.
that? Why did you name me after that one?
I'm the replacement. You named my title after them. What happens when you no longer need me?
Kids.
And on top, it's not even that necessarily that this hasn't happened before, because he had 20 kids.
Mm-hmm.
At the peak, there were 21 of these kids. And by the time the Horus Heresy kicks off, there are 19, because the 2nd and 11th Legion just don't exist anymore. We don't know what. All we know is gone. They are erased from records.
Mm-hmm.
They were the brothers, whether they killed them themselves, whether they integrated parts of their legions to their own, whether they ended up just killing them all to a man. Something happened. They don't even really remember what happened to them. We do know there were at least 2 other Primarchs. There were at least 2 other Primarchs legions. They don't exist anymore.
Uh-huh.
So, Emperor need them, got rid of them. It means there's a precedent to him seeing these things he no longer needs, saying, "Why now? It doesn't matter if you're a demigod, effectively. You have a person who is looking at you, no matter how callous or kind he may be, depending on the scenario. You have a being that, yes, you may call him father, but that doesn't always necessarily mean you are son."
That sounds like someone I know. That makes total sense. One of those.
This spurs a lot of certain emotions in some Primarchs, which makes a ripe breeding ground for chaos to come in. And in the form especially, Horus was probably one of the best catches they could have, because nothing is more useful to disrupting a war effort than corrupting the leader of said war effort.
Yeah, who was the Emperor's favorite kid? Like, did he have a favorite? Like, one you could tell, like, oh, you like him the most?
Horus, because he trusted the entire, war effort to the guy.
True.
Although there were certain elements of several of his kids that he liked. Some were absolutely just dunked on.
Was there one that was very much the F up? Like, oh, you're the screw up kid.
Oh yeah. When we get to Angron's episode, especially, it's just like, you look at him, you look at his history, it's just like, wow. There were a fair few of Primarchs who joined Heresy, and you're like, okay, they just have inadequacies and egos and stuff that get stroked by the wrong people. Then there were some other Primarchs that joined, and you're like, yeah, no, they were completely justified. Heresy kicks off, and he's kind of in a rock and a hard place, because he can't really leave Earth. He could beat Horus, 1v1, but Horus is genius tactician and strategist. He knows the war effort, knows where things go, knows how his brothers move, because that was his job. He was designed to his job was to send his brothers to wherever they needed to go, which brother would do the best thing at what area when. Meaning he knows how they think, how they operate, what resources are at their disposal, and he has been plotting this for several decades now. So he is prepared in a way that others aren't. And the Emperor can, defeat him if he really wants to, but it means Terra especially is vulnerable. So he is very much kind of stuck. He can't really leave Terra. He can't really engage Horus outside, because there's so many factors being moved around. For all his power, he's also kind of helpless. So eventually, the Horus gets to Terra.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the story from there. They fight. Horus gets, purged. Emperor gets wounded. He ends up on the Golden Throne as a life support unit. And this is where things kind of get, I suppose, where things get kind of weird. Because the thing about the Golden Throne was, again, it was never so much of the Imperium, including its tech, its architecture, even developed by the Emperor in conjunction with other people, was cobbled together.
Mm.
A lot of it is, and despite he's never going to admit it, a lot of what the Emperor does create is copied from the Eldar. Golden Throne isn't, for starters, it's massive. You ever see pictures of the Golden Throne? It's like hundreds of steps leading up to this glowing pillar at the top of this almost mountain-sized chair. Part of that is aesthetics. Part of that is also just design, because the Golden Throne it runs miles. The wires and cabling and tech runs miles throughout the palace. And it is a very powerful machine. It has been not meant to last that long. It definitely was not meant to be made into a life support unit. So instead of being, a little one and done, use this for the, in the meanwhile until we make something better, it became both the prison and saving grace of the Emperor. It's also failing, because the Emperor, he can't heal himself. He has incredible psychic might. He's arguably in a coma. I don't really know. So he's stuck, rotting on this chair, and has to also suffer because the way they sustain him and sustain his light and his life, and by extension, the Astronomicon itself, is daily sacrifices to 1,000 psychers. There will be ships known as black ships that patrol the galaxy. They will take psychers. Some are lucky, and they will be used. They will become sanctioned psychers. Some of them, will go through these extreme trials, and maybe you're moved to be attached to a guard unit, or put on a ship somewhere, made into a in some rare scenarios, you might even become a Grey Knight. Who knows? Maybe you'll be attached to an Inquisitor. A vast majority of them just get stuck in pods and drained of power until they're dust. This is a daily thing. There are millions of psychers sacrificed each year to keep this thing burning. And so for Emperor, he feels that, and sense that. He have thousands of people just dying That's not even counting the thousands of people trillions, who are praying to him. Because remember, he can feel that. This is where we get into the weird part where he's not a god. But there's very weird elements of him. Are like, okay. Because he was already in that weird position before he ended up on a chair where he was like, I am not God, while just sort of glowing. Like, the sun in golden armor with a flaming sword, as you do. But it's kind of gotten worse. Because, you already have the whole imperial cult, the state-sponsored religion. But then you also have things like living saints. And these are just like certain heroes and people who, for whatever reason, can't really die. They are imbued with the Emperor's light, and they just sort of end up on battlefields, and they'll pop up, and they just have these supernatural powers. A lot of them have wings and halos glowing with golden light in the name of the Emperor. He's not a god. Then you've got, Emperor's Tarot. It's like this special pack of tarot cards. And a lot of times high-ranking officials will use it to kind of tell the future.
Do they actually work, or are they just for show?
They'll work.
Okay.
That's the weird thing. They'll just work sometimes. But you can kind of just go ahead and figure things out from them, and it's like they're largely considered fact upon, the Emperor's Tarot is incredibly... You don't discard what that says. Then you have, other times where it's he has different moments where, people will pray to him, and sometimes they'll see golden light, and he'll answer. You'll have different moments. There's, one where this guy swears he was possessed by a demon, and he throws himself into a great sacrifice because the demon is, taking control of his body, and somehow he survives. He's incredibly wounded, but he survives, and he sees golden light and the feel of the Emperor, presumably the Emperor's might, burning the demon free from him as he prays in what he thinks is going to be in his last moments. You have people you have Sisters of Battle, who are fervent believers of the Emperor as the God Emperor. And sometimes they will pray, and they'll be able to heal themselves using golden light and his power. They'll be able to call upon incredible, blast of holy power to banish or parry or fight demons one-on-one. Even Chaos Space Marines sometimes. And it's just oh yeah, but he's not a god. And yet,
Kind of doing good stuff.
Just okay, at this point it's I don't know what he is. And this is where we come to biggest theories of not only what he is now, but what he's going to become. There's several theories, there's several interpretations, there's several thoughts on how this is going to end up. One of three are some of my favorites. Or there's three more prevalent ones. The first being just...
Oh, he's a chaos god.
The only thing that... whether or not he started as a chaos god, whether you think he becomes a chaos god, there is what is arguably an undeniable presence, his presence in the warp. And with millennia of trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of people praying and giving praise to him and sacrificing their lives to him in his name, that he is just a chaos god who is waiting to be born, And the only thing keeping him from being born as a fully fledged 5th Chaos God is his mortal shell upon the throne. And one day that's just gonna die, and he's just gonna come across as his true, powerful. It's also an interesting. So there's this theory known as the Star Child theory, and there's several elements to that. So I think
it's funny because Star Child's actually a character in He-Man. That's a funny coincidence.
There's two versions of this. Oh no, there's several versions of this, I think, but there's two more prevalent concepts of this. This is arguably considered. So arguably, this was his early lore. This guy came up in a few different areas of I think it's way back in 3rd or 2nd edition. 40k. This is early possible quote unquote lore. It's one of those things that's sort of been retconned. Also not, but also there's elements of it that keep making its way back to modern 40k. So we're okay. So there's the theory of the senseis. The idea being, before he had his Primarchs, Emperor being just a dude, different forms, he got around. He slept with women, mortal women, and sometimes those women had kids. And those kids had strains of his genetic code. And mortal, all of them were sterile. And they've been just kicking around for centuries.
Or did you say immortal or mortal?
Immortal.
Okay.
Could be argued. I think arguably this is one of the earliest ideas of perpetuals came from, but it's weird. The idea being people with the Emperor's genetic strain kicking about in the galaxy, and there is this subset of the Inquisition, because the Inquisition isn't a singular body. There's different orders, often tending to fight with each other. There's a certain order, ironically named the Illuminati.
Of course.
And they believe that they can hunt down these senseis, these aspects of the Emperor, these genetic little drops of the Emperor, because they do believe in the Chaos God Emperor theory. Also, desperately don't want that to happen. Because they know what happened to the Eldar when Slanesh popped up. And they know what happened to the galaxy when Slanesh popped up. We ended up with a hole in reality, warp storms, and just 5,000 years of despair and horror. So we don't know what happens when a potential Chaos God, one intimately connected to humanity, pops up. What's gonna happen to us? When Slanesh popped up, most of the Eldar pretty much lost their souls. Their idea being, okay, how do we prevent this from happening while also bringing the Emperor back? I don't know, we'll gather his kids, and kids were gonna have these kids known as senseis. And the idea being, we will slowly gather these kids and protect them, because the idea that any besides the Primarchs exist is heretical to a lot of people, especially in the Inquisition. So we'll protect them from the Inquisition. And they tell these kids, hey, you know what? One day, Dad's gonna come back, and it'll be your job to protect him when he is mortal and vulnerable. And they don't know is the true plan is just sacrifice all these kids. Well, they're grown people, but just sacrifice them. And the idea being, we don't want humanity to lose our souls in mass. So we gather all these senseis, and they tell these senseis, hey, you're going to protect your dad when he's reborn. He's going to be vulnerable. and he's going to be mortal for a while, and we don't know what's going to happen, but you will be his knights. And they're like, okay, cool. The true plan being, we're actually going to sacrifice all these kids, and we are going to, the idea being, we can do a repeat of what possibly happened to the Emperor in the very beginning of humanity with the whole shaman sacrificing their life force thing. We sacrifice all these kids. When the Emperor dies, his soul goes ahead and I guess merges with their life force, and he's reborn as the Sensei Emperor, and he just sort of reborn and rehealed, and he pops off the golden throne. He's back. That is not my favorite theory.
Fair.
It feels a little mundane, but it's very old. This is vaguely connected to the Star Child in some respects, but I kind of enjoy the Star Child theories as its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the Star Child theory is, at least this iteration, is presented as such. That during the big fight with Horus, the Star Child, or rather the Emperor, at the moment of his wounded, separated parts of himself, particularly the better parts of himself, his compassion, his empathy, his kindness, and it spiraled off into the warp, and it's sort of hidden in there, nestled and growing stronger. And what's on the golden throne is just a weird husk. The real emperor, so to speak, is just sort of waiting to be reborn, and then when we need him most, he will be reborn as an infant of immense power.
Jesus allegory.
Oh, Jesus allegories are all over the place.
I can tell.
He will be reborn as an infant of immense power, and they will grow and lead humanity to a new golden age when we need them most. There are variations of this theory. I think that's one. Arguably, I think this is one of the most interesting ones, because there's the idea that what is on the throne isn't the Emperor, but it's not the Emperor. Because it has a lot of worship going towards it. It has a lot of power going towards it. And it's still taking on a life of its own. Which there could be an argument to be made that the Emperor has been split into two.
Ooh, interesting.
That there's something on the throne that's alive. There's something else that's out there, the better parts of him, this Star Child. Both are real, both are going to come up, and both of them are going to end up either saving or dooming humanity.
Interesting. I mean, how do you feel about that theory? Do you think that it's true?
Well, the thing about the Star Child is that there have been, especially in more recent times, there have been more and more allusions to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there have been people in groups and just like different people who see like different visions. There have been sightings of like powerful, glowing, small child wandering the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
There is a particular moment during, I believe it's the Plague Wars, where something, a girl with immense power comes through and just, we don't know what she or who she is, but like, it's during the forces of Nurgle themselves look at her and call her anathema. The name for the Emperor. That is the chaos name for the Emperor.
Interesting.
And there's just... So I think it's a very interesting path to take, because I think, well, beyond the Jesus allegory, I think it is one of the more, I guess, arguably hopeful, because 40K is a world of grimdark, but there are moments of hope. And with these moments of hope, especially since you have these Primarchs coming back, you have the chips are increasingly down, the world, the galaxy, is seemingly on its constant last legs, but you have these moments of hope. And it might take actual decades before we actually hear, if anything, concrete about this. But I think this idea that you have this rebirth, not the Emperor of old, this giant 15-foot tall guy in golden armor who's burning churches and doing all this stuff, not this rushed kind of administration and imperium that's rotting and broken and half built and just barely holding on, but the potential for something new and, I guess, purer.
Interesting. That can make sense. I also feel like it's an interesting theory because I just feel like the Emperor just wouldn't go down so easily as just, well, I'm a skeleton in a chair forever. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy.
Yeah, no, he's still kind of there. Like, he does sort of talk to Gilliman when Gilliman comes back, but it's weird. We don't really know what he is. We don't know what's coming off that chair, if it's gonna come off at all. We don't know almost what's worse, if something stands up or never does. Because either way, we're kind of screwed, but also there's the chance we're not.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. You think like what's down the chair and the Star Child might have to fight each other?
There could be an argument. Again, this is all just theories.
Mm-hmm.
Star Child especially is a little bit more concrete, but the idea of this Dark King Emperor, this worst reflections of humanity fighting the better parts of humanity, these two halves, fanaticism and faith versus compassion and kindness, and the strength that both of these elements have fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. If we ever do, it's gonna be very, very weird, because we already have so much on our plate. 40K wise, 42nd. You still got the space cockroaches are still chewing at the Imperium. Like, half the galaxy is still torn apart. We don't even have half the Primarchs back yet. Like,
and then it's just another one thing after another. One thing.
Yep. Yes, sirree. I think the argument could be like, if we ever saw them at full force, it would have to be decades later, in real life, with the Primarchs back, and maybe just one climactic battle. There's a question. You could possibly go Age of Sigmar with it. It, starts a new galaxy somewhere else, the rebirth of humanity somewhere else. It's doubtful, because unlike fantasy, I can't really see 40K ever really getting an ending.
Yeah, it's funny. They are kind of setting up a second coming situation with the Star Child, though.
It's again, the canonicity of it is very. It's a lot of it was kind of forgotten, so the fact that any part of it is coming back is kind of strange. Interesting, but strange.
Or like, when did this start happening? Like, around what time, what year, out of universe, like in real time?
It's only been like the last decade or so. Like, it's a lot of it is, they're not necessarily like, they're little bits that like people have kind of like been like, oh, I see, because there's no one really getting like, although there's like one vision I think I've heard about where they kind of see an infant opening their eyes with golden eyes, and they're very intelligent, but like a lot of it is more glimpses that certain space marines or psychers have had here and there. Just like small, that hint at it. It's very minor little hints. So
Gotcha.
we can't even really say that, oh yeah, the Star Child is coming, because like it's not quite how it goes. But I do, like I said, I enjoy the idea of the Star Child and the Dark King, and it really would be kind of like the end of humanity. But that it would have to be like end of 40K, and like I said, I can't see that happening for decades. We only have like we've only really gotten 2 loyalist Primarchs back. Like we've got like 4 or 5 still somewhere in the galaxy. Not to mention the Traitor Legions, not to mention the Tyranids.
Makes sense.
But yeah, that is the Emperor in a nutshell. We're gonna see little bits of him, especially throughout the heresy. Mostly, again, how from other people's perspectives, like Malkador, who is a video unto himself, and of course, just how he treats his kid, which is a How he treats his kids is, your mileage may vary.
He's not winning the Parent Award of the Year award, it sounds like.
Ooh, no.
Like, how what are we talking? Are you talking Shadow Weaver level of bad, or are we talking worse?
Worse.
Oh, no.
Like, Shadow Weaver is almost arguably a saint.
Oh, gosh.
When the Emperor gets callous, he gets callous. And there's funny moments where you see him and he's like, he very clearly cares for some of these kids, and others are like, that's a number. I don't care what your name is.
I'm very curious. You almost feel like the Emperor's got like a split personality. Sometimes.
He's human. Even humans at our best have dark sides. Even humans at our worst have good sides. It's
True.
just you have these various extremes cranked up to 1,000 and in the shape of a giant man in golden armor who has to attempt to reunite and take control of and protect a massive galaxy of humans, trillions upon trillions of lives. Think about just how bad things can get in your own friend group at the wrong time.
True.
And then think about that times an uncountable trillions.
He's under a lot of stress, okay? Dude's under a lot of stress.
Yeah. It's a very heartwarming scene between him and Malcolm. I guess it's it's a very heartwarming scene between him and Malkador. A few times. Especially when we get to the Malkador episode. But, honestly, Malkador was like pretty much the closest thing he had to a best friend.
Aww.
But yeah, that is the Emperor in a nutshell. We'll get to learn more about him as the time goes on. But that's a little bit on his philosophy, a little bit on his morals, and you get to see really how what he was lays a lot of the groundwork for good and ill of what would become the Imperium.
I can see that. Definitely. Yeah, just imagine like, so one of those kids going like, "What your parents like?" and just goes like, "It's complicated. It's complicated."
Ooh boy. I can't wait to start talking about some of the Primarchs. But that was our episode. Joel, thank you for listening.
You're welcome.
Ladies, gentlemen, everyone beyond and before, and frankly, going beyond labels. Thank you for listening and or watching. This has been Warhammer and Weebs. I'm Kamara.
I'm Joel.
Have a good evening.